What's up everybody, this is Sean with Plus Money Media. I'm back with another betting pick breakdown for the upcoming UFC Fight Night this Saturday, Santos versus Ankalaev. I'm going to structure it the same way as last week, going over the single bets first and then my parlay picks. I'm going to work my way up the card as well. The first fight that I want to go over for straight bets or singles is going to be Bruno Silva versus Alex Pereira. Now, as I'm sure some of you know, Alex Pereira is a really hyped prospect at the moment. He was the one that actually knocked out Israel Adesanya in a kickboxing match, and there's a lot of hype surrounding this guy. He made his UFC debut a few months ago, and after a hard-fought first round, he was able to hit a flying knee in round 2 and knock out his opponent. For Bruno Silva, he has 19 wins by knockout and only 3 by decision, none by submission. And with Alex Pereira, a majority of his career has been spent primarily as a kickboxer, so I think it's safe to say that both of these guys love to strike. I think that must be the reason why Silva is listed as an underdog, even though he has much more MMA experience than Pereira. It seems like most people are thinking this one is going to be a striking war. It's looking like we're going to see a knockout on one side or the other. If it somehow does make it to the final bell, I can see this one being a long drawn out war. I think Silva is going to be a lot to deal with for Pereira, so even if Pereira does beat him, I think Silva will be able to give him 1 or 2 really tough rounds. I think the public is a little high on Alex Pereira's ability as someone who has very few MMA fights in the past few years. With a flying knee knockout in his UFC debut and a KO win over Stylebender in his career, makes a lot of sense that he would be this hyped, but I do think that Bruno Silva has other plans in mind for Saturday. I'm personally going with Bruno Silva at plus 149 if you're betting with Bovada. I think Silva definitely has a valid chance to win this fight, and at plus 149, I think it's a solid bet. Of course, it's still a very dangerous fight with Pereira being a really skilled kickboxer. If you are going to go with Silva and you're a little bit worried about Pereira's abilities, one way to hedge this would be to bet on the over. For this fight to hit the over of 1.5 rounds, it would pay out at plus 135. So that means all it has to do is get to 2 minutes and 30 seconds in the second round and the bet will win. If you're looking to bet on Pereira for a hedge, I would recommend betting on the rounds rather than betting on him to win by knockout. The reason I say this is because Bovada has him at minus 110 to win by knockout, which as we know is not plus money. However, if you were to bet on the rounds, you would get a lot bigger profit. I would recommend round 2 or 3 or both, and you would still hit a profit if either of those hit. But just to repeat, I'm going with Bruno Silva and the over of 1.5 rounds. Since these are so similarly priced, I'm going to bet the same amount of money on each one. I'm going to go with 1 to 2 units on either of these. So for most of us, 1 to 2 units is going to be $10 to $40. This way, if one of these wins and the other loses, I still make out with a profit, and of course there still is a chance of both of these tickets hitting, which is a type of play I love making. The next matchup I want to go over is Terrance Mckinney versus Drew Dober. Now, we saw Terrance Mckinney fight a couple weeks back against Fares Ziam. He was able to get a first round rear naked choke and took essentially no damage, and he's ready to go again, it looks like. Mckinney is a really exciting prospect. He's the type of guy that goes out on his shield. Each and every one of his 12 wins are by finish, and each of his losses are also by finish. His 3 losses were due to flying knee knockout, leg injury, and triangle choke, each of which are things that Drew Dober is not really known for doing. Like I mentioned before with Mckinney, he is a finisher. 7 of his 12 wins are by submission, which is a pretty high clip, and 4 of Dober's 12 losses are by submission as well. So I do think that's a nice little matchup. We also saw Islam Makhachev dominate Drew Dober on the ground. Not that Mckinney is anywhere near Islam, but I do see a clear path to victory through grappling and submissions for Terrance Mckinney. Because of some of these numbers, I'm going to sprinkle a little bit of money on Mckinney to win by submission. Bovada is paying out plus 400 for this one, which I think is a great price given how many submission wins he has and how many submission losses Drew Dober has. I'm rolling with Terrance Mckinney on this one. I think he's just too dangerous for Drew Dober. He's listed at plus 140 with Bovada. He started off closer to 175 and is now at plus 140. because all the money coming in this week has been backing him. I think Drew Dober is at the tail end of his career and that Terrance McKinney is just going to be too much for him. He's a rising star, and I think the UFC wants to see him succeed and wants to put him over in this one. So yeah, I'm going with the underdog here. I think we have a live dog in Terrance McKinney. I'm going to place a unit and a half to 2.5 units on this one, which is anywhere from $15 to $50 for most of us, depending on your bankroll size and how you handle risk. And I'm also going to sprinkle maybe half a unit on McKinney to win by submission at plus 400. So that's likely anywhere from $5 to $10, maybe $15 for most of us. You want to make sure you're betting the right amount for each of these. That way, if McKinney does win by decision or knockout, you're not losing money on this one. You still want to net a profit if he ends up winning by knockout or decision. The next fight I want to break down for single bets is going to be Khalil Rountree versus Karl Roberson. In this one, we have Rountree making his debut at middleweight. He had some decent success at 205, but wasn't able to stay too consistent with his wins. After losing to Johnny Walker, Rountree went to Thailand to learn Muay Thai, and his striking has been improving for the last few years. Honestly, both guys are a bit inconsistent, but I will say that Rountree's schedule has been a bit tougher. I'm going with Rountree as the underdog in this one. I think we have another live dog. Bovada has him at about plus 110 as the underdog, which isn't the juiciest line, but I just think with him moving down a weight class and with his improved striking, that he's going to look good against Roberson. I'm also going to bet for this one to go the distance. Bovada has that paying out at plus 145. The reason for this is that all 4 of Roberson's losses are by submission, and Khalil Rountree does not submit anyone. So I think we're going to see a striking fight. Perhaps Roberson will try to initiate grappling and Rountree will look to strike. Unless Rountree does secure the knockout, I don't think either one of these guys can finish the other. So I'm betting on the live dog in Khalil Rountree at plus 110, as well as a prop bet for this one to go the distance at plus 145. I'm personally going to bet a little bit less on the prop bet for it to go the distance because it pays out more and because I'm more confident in Rountree to win than anything else. I'm going to go with a unit to a unit and a half on both of these, with more coming on the Rountree pick, as I mentioned. For most of us, that's going to be within the $10 to $30 range, but I definitely do see this one going the distance unless Rountree can get the knockout. The next and final fight that I want to go over as far as straight bets and singles I want to place is going to be Yadong Song versus Marlon Moraes. As you can see here, Marlon Moraes has been fighting the absolute best of the best in the UFC for the past 4 or 5 years. He was almost able to win a bantamweight belt over Henry Cejudo before getting finished in the 3rd round, and he does have a win over the current bantamweight champ. He is on a slight decline. As I mentioned, he's fought the best of the best. A lot of his losses are by knockout. It seems that he allows himself to get pulled into a war. In addition to that, his gas tank has been shown to give out in multiple fights, so I would say he's the most dangerous in the beginning of the fight. In his last fight, he was finished by Merab Dvalishvili, but Merab was almost knocked out in that 1st round. Moraes spent all his energy trying to finish him, and he had nothing left after that. As for Song, most of his losses are by decision. He has a split decision win over Marlon Chito Vera, but I definitely think Chito Vera won that fight. I'm going to sprinkle on Marlon Moraes on this one at plus 200 with Bovada. At 2-to-1 odds, I just love the price for a guy that was almost a champion and has the ability to compete with the best of the best. The reason I'm only sprinkling maybe half a unit to 3/4 of a unit is because of his gas tank issues, really. But what I saw from him in his last fight, it showed that he still has finishing ability, and I just can't get away from that plus 200 price. There are 2 main ways I'd recommend hedging if you're interested in doing that. You can go with Song in round 2. For Song to win by knockout is not a very profitable bet at the moment, so that's why I advise to bet on the rounds. Pretty much all of Song's knockouts are in rounds 1 or 2, and Marlon Moraes is absolutely the most dangerous in that 1st round. Many of Moraes' knockouts actually take place in round 2 as well, because like I said, he likes to go to war. Maybe he'll almost get the finish in round 1, punch himself out, and often will get knocked out in round 2. For Song to win in round 2 in any way, it actually pays out at plus 450 for Bovada, which is a really decent price. Since it's a pretty risky ticket, I'm only going to sprinkle on this one maybe half a unit at most, which means $10 or so at most. The other way to hedge this one might not be as juicy as that one, but it is a little bit safer. For this one to complete 2 full rounds, Bovada has the payout listed at plus 125. There is, of course, a chance that both of these bets hit if you hedge it this way, and if Marlon Moraes does lose, this one might be your saving grace. I would consider maybe half a unit to a unit and a half on this one. Same goes for Moraes himself. I'm going with half a unit to a unit and a half, which again is anywhere from $5 to $30 for most of us. All right, guys, now time for the juicy stuff, the parlays. We're going to talk about the picks that I'm confident enough in to parlay with other picks. We're going to go ahead and start at the bottom of the card and work our way up. But the first fight I want to talk about is Kris Moutinho versus Guido Cannetti. I'm going with Kris Moutinho in this one. He's listed as a slight favorite by Bovada at minus 150. And this one totally feels like a fight that's just set up to put Moutinho over. Obviously, we all remember him from Sean O'Malley's last fight, where he took an absolute beating, but just kept coming forward, and Sean O'Malley was never really able to finish him. Fans responded really well to his toughness and everything, so I think the UFC is trying to build his name up a little bit. Cannetti has had an absolutely rocky road. He hasn't finished a fight since 2013 and has never finished a fight in the UFC. He even lost both of his fights on the Ultimate Fighter Latin America. Moutinho has never lost a fight by decision, so you absolutely have to put him away. And we saw how tough it is to finish him when he fought Sean O'Malley. A lot of Cannetti's recent losses are from people no longer on the UFC roster, and even some of Moutinho's losses from before he was in the UFC are from people like Tony Gravely, who are successful in the UFC today. So with all that being said, I definitely have Kris Moutinho in this one. I'm very confident in him to win this fight. I would definitely recommend putting him on most of your parlays, which is going to be anywhere from, say, 60 to 80%. So if you place 5 total parlays, I recommend having him on 3 to 4 of those. I think he's a really chalky pick this week, and I don't see him losing this one. As always, your parlay tickets should be right around 1 unit. Some will be a little more or a little less, but the value of a unit for you is basically determined by your average bet. So let's say you like to make parlays at $10, your unit size will be $10. Having said that, the next fight I want to go over for parlay picks is going to be Miranda Maverick versus Sabina Mazo. I'm going with Miranda Maverick on this one. She's listed as a pretty big favorite at minus 335 with Bovada. Sabina Mazo is going to have height and reach, pretty significant reach and height advantage, but Miranda Maverick is going to have a physicality and strength advantage over her. Both of these women lost their last 2 fights, but as we know, not all losses are equal. Miranda Maverick ran into a buzzsaw in each of her last 2 fights against a resurging Macy Barber and a scary up-and-coming prospect in Erin Blanchfield. She was on a nice winning streak before that. She has strong grappling, clinch work, and control, and I just think she's set for a bounce back in this one. I think this is someone that the UFC wants to see rise up the ranks and help her build her name up. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Sabina Mazo has most of her wins by decision, and 100% of Maverick's losses are by decision. I'm putting Maverick on a small percentage of my parlays, maybe 1 to 3 total tickets. So I'm also going to sprinkle some for this one not to go the distance. Bovada has that listed at plus 185 if this one does not go the full distance. And if you're concerned that Sabina Mazo might be able to get the win, definitely place a prop bet for her to win by decision. As I mentioned before, this is how most of her victories come and how all of Maverick's defeats come. And for Mazo to win by decision would pay out at plus 400, which is a solid price from Bovada. If you're nervous about Mazo winning the fight, this is likely her only possible method of victory. For the won't go the distance prop, I'm going to sprinkle half a unit on that one, which is going to be $5 to $10 for most of us. And I think you're fine putting the same amount if you decide to hedge with Sabina Mazo to win by decision. The next fight that I want to throw on some parlays is going to be Sodiq Yusuff versus Alex Caceres. Yusuff is coming off his first and only UFC loss to Arnold Allen, another up-and-coming prospect. Yusuff should be looking to bounce back in this one. Alex is a veteran with a lot of experience in the octagon. Most of his wins and losses are by submission or decision. He doesn't knock his opponent out a lot or get knocked out a lot himself. I think this is because he's slick and crafty enough to defend and get out of the way, but doesn't have the power to really put you away. As for Yusuff, he does not submit people. he only wins by knockout or decision. He also has some solid wins over people like Gabriel Benitez. I do see these guys deciding to strike. I'm going to have to go with Yusuff on this one as the young up-and-coming prospect, looking to bounce back from his first loss. Caceres is on a small win streak, but he isn't usually fighting the most dangerous of guys. I'm going with Sodiq Yusuff at -250 with Bovada. I would feel comfortable throwing him on a few, but no more than half of all of your parlays. The other pick from this fight that I'm perhaps more confident in is that the over of 1.5 rounds will hit. Basically, that just means this fight will at least go to 2 minutes and 30 seconds into the second round. And like I said before, I really do see that happening. At -300, it also seems that Bovada expects this one to go a little bit longer. I can see Yusuff getting a finish, but I can't see Caceres getting a finish. So that sets us up for a win either way. I'd say it's safe to put Yusuff on maybe 1 to 3 parlays or so, and maybe make one extra for the over to hit. And just a reminder that all of these parlays should be right about 1 unit, give or take a little bit. So the last fight that I want to break down for this video and for my parlay picks is going to be the main event, Magomed Ankalaev versus Thiago Santos. Santos is a legend and an absolute monster, but he's had a bit of a tough go since his loss to Jones. Since he was dealing with a significant knee injury in that fight, it seems like he's been still figuring things out. He has 1 win since that point, and it was an uneventful main event versus Johnny Walker about a month or so ago. Neither fighter did much. They were both really tentative, and not a lot happened. He is always dangerous, he'll always be dangerous, but Magomed Ankalaev has no real holes in his game, and he's on the rise right now. He has wrestling ability, he seems to have a really high fight IQ, he's got clean, sharp technique, fast, rangy strikes. He's honestly been looking better and better each time we've seen him. He finished Cutelaba twice, and his only loss was a sort of a Hail Mary triangle choke submission versus Paul Craig early in his UFC career. Having said that, I have to go with Ankalaev in this one, with Bovada listing him at a -650 favorite. Now realistically, you should be nervous betting on any fighter at -650, especially when they're facing someone as dangerous as Thiago Santos, but I really can't see Thiago Santos getting this done. I'm personally placing Ankalaev on anywhere from half to 80% of my parlays because I'm really confident in the fact that his momentum is upward, and as far as Thiago Santos's entire career, he might be on the back end. Now, both of these guys are really hard to finish. It's extremely rare that either of them get finished. And I think if Santos didn't have his knee injury, he wouldn't have got finished in the same way by Teixeira. And I think they're both super tough. So for that reason, I'm also going to include that this fight will complete 2 full rounds onto my parlays. That's going to pay out at -200 from Bovada, which is a really great price because like I said, I definitely see this one going at least 2 rounds. It's a 5-round fight. We know some of these guys take their time in main events. And as I mentioned, they're both super hard to get out of there. Whether you're going to take Magomed Ankalaev or not, I definitely recommend that you parlay this one going 2 full rounds. I'm really confident in that one. Whether you do either of these parlay picks, another bet that I like for the main event is going to be Santos by knockout. If you're confident that Thiago Santos can win the fight, place a bet for him to win by knockout. Bovada will pay you +750 for that if it wins, which is an amazing price. Personally, I don't see Santos being able to win a 5-round fight versus Ankalaev, and I know he won't submit him, so this might be his only real method of victory. It doesn't take much, just sprinkle a little bit on that one if you're confident in Santos. But as I mentioned, I'm going with Magomed Ankalaev, and for this one to go 2 full rounds. I definitely see one of these hitting, and if I'm being honest, I personally see both of them hitting. Here are some examples of some parlays you can set up using the picks from this video, without being all in on any one pick. Now you don't have to place all of these, but you should be able to find some winners based on this outline. This way, if there is an upset or a bad decision by the judges, you're still protected. But that's going to cut it for this one, guys. Those are my picks and my bets for this upcoming weekend's fights. I think there's going to be some great fights to watch in this card, and we're in for a pretty interesting main event. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree, and let me know how you did last week as well. If you liked this video at all, or if it helped you make your picks for the week, Consider dropping a like, and if you're interested in getting picks for future events, definitely click subscribe. All this stuff helps me out quite a bit in the algorithm. Keep an eye out for more videos. I'm going to be dropping picks for every UFC event, and I'm also working on my sports betting for Scrub series. Share this video and channel with any friends you may have that play sports bets. But that's going to wrap it up for this one, guys. Let's have another winning weekend, and I'll see you at the window.